Good morning, everyone. In this week's Torah portion, we read the famous story of God telling Moses to speak to the rock and it will produce water. And Moses strikes the rock. And God says, because you did not sanctify my name by speaking to the rock, but rather struck the rock, you will not be able to go into the land of Israel. And despite Moses' numerous prayers and pleas to go into the land of Israel, he is ultimately denied entry into the land of Israel. And the question is twofold. The first question is, it seems quite harsh to punish Moses after leading the Jews from Egypt to the promised land, and to be able to be on the verge of entering the land and being told you can't go in. Why? Because you struck a rock. What is so terrible about striking a rock? And second of all, we find that 40 years earlier, when the Jews entered into the desert, there was also a lack of water. And there God told Moses, take your staff and strike the rock and it will produce water. So if the first time around he was told to strike the rock, why now was it considered a sin to strike the rock? And one of the beautiful answers given is that God was not punishing Moses, but rather saying to Moses, you are no longer the right leader for this generation. You see, the difference between the first incident with the water and the second one was that the first one was with a nation that just left slavery. And therefore, their way of dealing and communicating was through power and strength. That's what they were accustomed to. The staff, the rod, the stick. And therefore the metaphor was strike the rock. The way to lead them is with power and strength, because that's their mentality. But the generation that Moses was producing water for was the next generation that was born and raised in freedom in the desert. And therefore God says, no longer shall you go with strength and power. That's not the way you relate to them. That's not what they understand. You have to go with words. You have to speak to them, like speak to the rock. And therefore, when Moses strikes the rock, God says, you are no longer fit to lead this nation, because this generation needs a new leader. Today is the 3rd of Tammuz. It's the 30th anniversary of the passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe assumed the leadership of the Chabad movement in 1951. And we all know he built a global, worldwide institution with 5,000 Chabad centers worldwide, and many, many other thousands of emissaries and students around the world carrying on his mission of reaching every Jew with love and with Judaism. And the Rebbe was not only an extraordinary leader, but he was the right leader for the generation. A generation after the Holocaust. A generation that needed healing and needed uplifting. And therefore the Rebbe was the one who came with love and with words of kindness and compassion. Not with the stick, but with the words of how you speak to a generation of Americans who are in the land of the free. And you can't tell them, as Herman Wouk was once told by the Rebbe, the American youth, you can't tell them to do anything, but you could explain to them why they should do everything. And it was this method of leading the Jewish people that uplifted and drew so many closer to Judaism. There's a story told about this young man. He was dating a non-Jewish woman, and he was madly in love with her and really wanted to marry her, but he was torn. He knew that it's not the right thing. And so he came to Lubavitcher Rebbe at dollars to get a blessing. And he said to the Rebbe, Rebbe, I'm dating this non-Jewish girl. She's beautiful. She's wonderful. I'm madly in love with her. And I want to marry her. What should I do? And he thought the Rebbe would reprimand him and tell him, you should not do that. You need to marry a Jewish girl, to have a Jewish children. And he was shocked to hear what the Rebbe said to him. The Rebbe said to him, I am jealous of you. I am envious of you. He couldn't believe his ears. The Rebbe's jealous of him that he's dating a non-Jewish model. And the Rebbe explained to him that in Judaism, the more effort it takes to do the right thing, the greater the reward, the greater the spiritual elevation. The Rebbe said, I never had the opportunity to be madly in love with a non-Jewish girl and be able to do the right thing and not marry her because I want to marry a Jewish person and build a Jewish family. And therefore I envy you that you have this opportunity to have such a great spiritual elevation and righteous deed to perform, that I was never given such an opportunity. And suddenly this fellow, instead of feeling bad, he started to feel, wow, I have such a golden opportunity. And after he left the Rebbe, of course he decided that he wanted to marry a Jewish woman. That's the way the Rebbe communicated to people. Not by putting people down, but by showing them their greatness and their potential. There was a lecturer once speaking to an audience and in a Jewish learning retreat. And she said to the audience, if your kid is going off to college and you could give them one book, what book would you give them? So one said I would give them the Bible, one said I would give them this Jewish book, that Jewish book. And then one person stood up and said I would give them a directory of the 4,000 Chabad houses around the world. Because the message I would give my child is, my son, my daughter, wherever you go in the world, you always have a place to call home. But the Rebbe taught us is that we're all family and we all have each other. And therefore, wherever a Jew is in the world, there is always a place to call home, which is their Jewish family that's awaiting them. Dinie and I came to Palm Beach just at about the time that the Rebbe passed away. The reason we came to Palm Beach was for one reason and one reason only. Because we were raised in Crown Heights by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We stood at his talks and heard him speak for hours and hours about the importance of reaching every Jew and sharing the beauty of Judaism with every Jew. And that's what motivated us to leave Brooklyn and to come settle in Palm Beach, where we could build a synagogue and carry on the love and the passion for Judaism that the Rebbe had, to bring it to every Jew in every part of the world. We are honored to be the Rebbe's emissaries. And today on his yahrzeit, each and every one of us has to think about how we can come closer to Judaism and bring our fellow Jews closer as well. May the Rebbe's soul be elevated, may be a source of blessing and inspiration for all of us. Have a wonderful day.